Welcome everybody to the Business of Arboriculture webinar today. We will be starting it promptly at, 12 Central or maybe 1 Eastern, depending on what time zone you're in. As is our tradition with a lot of the webinars that I participate in, if y'all can find the chat function and just let us know where you're coming from. It's always nice to see where people join us from. Bienvenido Marco de Perú. Somebody from Peru. Awesome. Welcome, Caitlin from Kentucky. Trey from Texas. Oh boy, now people are coming in fast. Pam from Spokane, Washington. Philadelphia. Mark, Atlanta. Welcome, everybody, to the Business of Arboriculture. As you join us, please let us know where you're coming from. We will start the formal webinar at the top of the hour. Welcome, Kim from Atlanta. So, Jesse, some of your Georgia folks joining us. And Nick, where are you joining us from?
Duluth, Georgia, so just outside Atlanta.
Okay. Welcome, Daryl, New York. Did y'all have any storm damage with those storms that came through earlier this week up there in the Atlanta area? I know North Alabama around Huntsville had a fair amount of tree damage. Did y'all have anything?
Yeah, we had a few crews on storm. I mean, it wasn't significant, but I actually live in Winder, Georgia. But yeah, about 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it was a heck of a windstorm, thunder, lightning. Yeah, it was significant. It was a lot. Then it rolled through pretty quick.
I've been in Augusta, Georgia all week. I live in Athens, but I was in Augusta and I heard it come through, but they can't really take any more storm damage in Augusta. So there fortunately wasn't any significant damage.
Yeah, I'm on Alabama's Gulf Coast, and so we didn't even get rain down here. It was certainly the northern end of the state of Alabama. Welcome, Craig from Ontario. Welcome, everybody, to the Business of Arboriculture. We'll start the webinar here in a few seconds once we hit the top of the hour. As is our tradition, let us know where you're coming from. Good morning, Miguel. It's about to be good afternoon for me here in Central Time Zone. Well, everybody, my clock reads 12 Central. I know it's probably different from participants who are joining us from across the country and across the world. Welcome to the Business of Arboriculture webinar series. This is a webinar series brought to you by Raising Trees. My name is Bo Broadbeck. I work with Auburn University here as an extension urban forester. Real quick, a little bit about this webinar series and a little bit of an introduction. The Business of Arboriculture webinar series is a collaboration with multiple organizations that are making this possible for you today. We have the Georgia Arborist Association, and with me is my co-host, Jesse McKellen, who is part of GAA. This is also a collaboration with the Warnell College of Forestry with the University of Georgia, of course, Auburn University, my institution, and this is all being funded by a grant that we had through the U.S. Forest Service through the Urban and Community Forestry Program that is making this series possible. The Business of Arboriculture series is an introductory series looking at new business owners or existing business owners that are looking to grow They're businesses in the field of arboriculture. It's a field where we come from a lot of different places, a lot of different backgrounds. And so we're wanting to provide some guidance and some information. And so our series has covered a variety of topics over the last 6 months, from taxes to costing tree care businesses to safety. And today we're going to be talking about scalable fleet management. There is a lot to running these businesses, and so we hope to bring some of that information for you today. This is our second to last webinar. We have one more coming up next month on building a safety program. I would now like to introduce my co-host, Jesse McCallan, who's going to give us a little bit of housekeeping notes and introduce today's speaker.
Thanks, Bo. Appreciate it. So as he mentioned, this is the second to last in this series. If you happen to miss the other videos or the webinars in the series, they are available on our YouTube channel. At some point during this presentation, I will drop a link to that group of videos in the chat so you can access them and watch the previous videos from this series. I hope you'll be able to join us on June 26th for the final meeting with Safety from Scratch. A little bit of other housekeeping. If you are here for a CU credit, I will be putting a link in the chat as well at the end of the program. So you'll have to stay to the end to get that CU credit. Look for that in the chat at the end. If you have questions during Nick's presentation, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A. I will be monitoring the Q&A and I will ask those questions as they come up. So please be mindful of putting those in the Q&A and not in the chat. I'll be monitoring the Q&A for that. You can chat amongst yourself in the chat, but leave the questions for the Q&A. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Nick Oney. I was at a UAA presentation where Nick spoke, and I said, you know what, that needs to be part of this this series, because I felt like it was information that would be valuable to this audience. Matt Searles was there as well, and he reached out to who's been part of the committee in planning these webinars, and he reached out to Nick, and Nick agreed to be a part of this series. So welcome, Nick, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So let's jump right into it. So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be covering how to build a scalable fleet management system designed for small business owners, especially those on limited budgets. So whether you're just starting or you're scaling, we want to give you tools and framework to succeed. Introduction. So this session, it's designed to be practical, not just theoretical. So I don't want to throw a bunch of buzzwords or pitch you some fleet management software that you may or may not need. My goal is to give you clear, simple framework to get organized, get control of your assets, control of your fleet, and build a foundation that's ready for growth. So we're going to be covering things like checklists, tools, SOPs, and simple systems that, whether you've got 3 trucks, 30, or 3,000, that you're going to be able to scale your fleet. So now, who is the session for? First, it's for the new business owners who are just starting to manage vehicles and equipment. Maybe you've been tracking everything in your head or a notebook, and it's starting to feel like too much. So I want you to walk away with a system that can give you a peace of mind moving forward. Second, it's for owners that are looking to grow. Maybe you've added more to your fleet. You're hiring new drivers. You're expanding your territory into different states. And so you're managing it more remote. It's not as hands-on as it used to be. And so what we need in order to manage that is we need structure. Because what works at 5 units that's local to you, that you can see each day, may not translate into owning 500 trucks that are spread across multiple different states. And third, it's for owners preparing for investments or even partnerships. So whether you're looking to attract private equity, looking to sell one day, bring in leadership support, having a professional fleet system shows that you're running a real scalable business. Fleet may not be the biggest part of your company, but it touches everything from safety, cost, customer service, and quite frankly, your credibility as well. When it's dialed in, it becomes an asset and not just a headache. So I'm Nick Oney. I'm the current fleet director of Xylem and Kendall. I've been here just over 8 years. So personal background, born and raised in Jefferson, Georgia. I went to UGA, so really big Bulldogs fan, go Dogs. Got a mechanical engineering degree from there. And so there'll be a theme. I'm very data driven. I like to make decisions, not always on gut, but show me the numbers and let's make informed decisions and get the buy-in from that. So I began as the fleet manager for WA Kendall in 2017. We were family owned at the time, and we had a good sized fleet when I did join. We were probably about 500 assets and a mix between buckets, chippers, giraffes. We had a lot, but we were family owned. So with that, department heads wore a lot of different hats. And so a little bit about Kendall, Xylem, and what we do. We are a full service line clearing contractor, meaning we trim right-of-ways for utilities. We perform emergency storm work, first responders to various hurricanes, getting the trees off the power lines. And right now we actually work coast to coast. And so there's been tremendous growth in the past 10 years across both brands. But again, if we back up to 2017, when I first joined, family owned, we wore a lot of hats. Example I always gave is our controller was also the head of IT, helped with HR. And so in a small business, you wear many hats and you're going to do whatever supports the organization at large. And that's good, but it does reach a breaking point of eventually to where you want to continue to grow. So in 2018, our company, we were purchased by a private equity, and that was one of their big initiatives, was to be able to set up the organization with defined departments, defined responsibilities, that as we continue to grow and the vision of going coast to coast, in order to do that, you got to be able to have the back-end systems and processes in order to handle that. In 2022, we merged with Xylem Tree Experts, thus doubling the size of our operations and doubling the size of our fleet. So it became very important that we had clear, concrete systems, processes, and how we were going to do things moving forward if we were going to continue to grow. The fleet management, it's often misunderstood just as fixing vehicles when they break, but it's much more strategic than that. As core, fleet management is about systematizing how you manage your assets, your people, and your data. So early attention to fleet systems, it's going to help you reduce unexpected downtime, extend your asset life, keep your team safer, stay compliant with your regulations, and avoid costly gaps, be it in insurance or inspections. So if we think of it this way, fleet is a foundation. If you scale operations on a broken fleet system, problems multiply fast. But if your foundation is strong, you can grow confidently, add assets, hire drivers, expand into new locations, and the system's gonna hold. When we go from managing operations in your fleet, where you can see everything in one day, if you had an 8-hour drive, to where you're in multiple different states and you don't have eyes on the fleet every single day, you're going to have systems, a fleet management system that can operate at scale in doing that. So that's why we want to start early. We want to start not when we've grown to the point that we're overwhelmed and we don't know what to do. So with this audience, if you're a small business owner and you're looking to scale, the perfect time to start that is now. And so once we reach 10x what you're at, we're able to still manage the fleet and still be able to operate. All right, so I want to start very practical. And at the end as well, we're going to have a 30-day plan that we lay out, just 4 weeks of just high-level things that are achievable, that anybody could do, and you don't have to have a fancy software to do it. So number one, for fleet management, let's start with what we have. This step is all about getting organized with what you already own. you don't need to get the fancy software to do this. You can do it in Excel, we can do it in various programs, but we just need to document everything that we have. And so what I recommend for this is let's walk our yard, the various job sites. Let's identify every vehicle, trailer, chipper, skid steer that we have. Whatever we consider our fleet, let's go ahead and get a list built in Excel of that. Next step is all of these assets need to be unique. We need to assign each of the assets an asset number. And big caveat here, you never want to duplicate an asset number. When we're talking about truck 123, we want to make sure that truck 123 is that 2018 Freightliner that we are referencing. Now, how you number your fleet, there's various different ways, and again, a little bit more on my background. We have done a lot of M&A activity. So as a part of that, I've been involved with many different analysis on fleet. Have actually been boots on the ground, inspecting the potential partnerships and the fleets. So with that, I've seen a lot of different ways that people number their equipment. You can do it chronologically, 1 through 100. Here's the next thing that I bought, added to the list. Mostly it's a little bit more detailed than that. Another way you can do it is put some type of acronym at the beginning. Maybe it's BKT for bucket, 1001, CH, 1002 for bucket, for chipper. And so I've seen many different iterations of it. The more detailed you get, it is easier to communicate, be it on the phone, text. The more detail you do have in an asset number, you're able to quickly identify that, hey, that's a 70-foot flatbed 4x4. And that is something that I need. I need to move it from point A to B. However, the longer an asset number becomes, it gets a little bit harder to remember what it actually is. So I think for your particular fleet, you can kind of find a sweet spot of what that number should be. But the biggest thing here is you want to make sure that asset number is unique, and we never repeat asset numbers. I've seen fleets that will number things and then you dispose of it, and then they'll reuse the number. For data keeping, historical tracking, big advice here is don't repeat asset numbers. It does make asset analysis down the road much more difficult. Okay, so the next step, we have on paper, we know what we have. We want to get that physical marking of the unique ID onto the assets. And so, as later as we describe our different processes, we know what asset we are referencing. If it's CH 1001, given our SOP, we'll just talk about in the slides coming up. We know that CH 1001, the last time it's oil got changed. We know that if it's broke down, here's the work order history for it. If we're communicating about it, operations has a visual cue of what this asset number is actually going to be. So again, even if you don't have a formal asset management software, most fleet lists that I'm giving during diligence, they are produced in Excel. And then from there, we will start doing our analysis. So that is a very low cost tool that we can do day one. Let's just get these assets numbered. So I wanted to put a quick sample here of what an asset list could look like. And again, these are very high level attributes that we apply to our own fleet. But wanted to provide it as an example of what we're going to look for. So after you've taken full inventory, next step is to turn this list into something useful, something that will actually help run your fleet. So here's where consistency becomes critical. You want to make sure that your asset names, the different asset types, the formats, they're standardized. And why do we do this? Inconsistent naming, it's going to lead to confusion. A good example is an asset type. If we call something an aerial lift, and then the next truck we get, we call it a bucket truck. And the next one we get, we call it a forestry truck. It's going to be very convoluted if you just need an asset of all of your aerial lift trucks. Again, it doesn't have to be aerial lift truck, but we just want uniformity in those asset types. So when we 10x the fleet, we're able to do quick snapshots of, hey, how many aerial lift trucks do I have? How many pickup trucks do I have? I'd also encourage this if we are starting from scratch on the different makes and models. There are many different abbreviations that you could call a Freightliner. We use FRGHT. So whatever that is, whatever we name a Freightliner in our system, I'd encourage that we do it the same every time. Because it goes back to, if we want to pull out all the Freightliners that are in the fleet, you're going to be able to sort, filter it much easier if we are uniform. The next thing that that I'd recommend is establishing an asset type for your fleet. So in our industry, internally, we've established types being aerial lift truck, backyard bucket, pickup, wraps, things like that. So every time we purchase an asset that fits within that category, we give it that type for those future analysis. Tell me the average age of my aerial lifts, or tell me how many aerial lifts I have that are broke out. This is very crucial in establishing those next level metrics. And so depending on what your fleet consists of, I would recommend giving it a uniform type. Next, what we want to do is we actually put a subtype. Subtype is going to be a little bit more detailed than the asset type. It's going to tell me that this aerial lift truck, it's 70 foot, I've got a dump body on it, and it's two-wheel drive. In a future state, if we are at 100 assets, we could then pull out how many 70-foot dump body two-wheel drives do we have and be able to dispatch them accordingly. Again, anything with the type, subtypes, makes, models, we want to make sure that they are uniform. And the best time to establish that uniformity is right at the beginning. We are building that asset list. With this as well, if you do decide to go from managing the fleet with the Microsoft products, being Excel, and you want to transition this into a fleet management software, most fleet management softwares are going to have the ability to add different attributes to your different assets. And so if you do have an established asset type, asset subtype, you're going to be able to most likely upload that into a fleet management software in the future. Fleet management software then could pivot and show you different KPIs that you may look for. But the building of that is establishing what your type and subtypes are going to be. Okay, so we've got our equipment list. We know year, make, model. We know the types, subtypes. That's great. So what's the next step? It's going to be establishing our standard operating procedures for the fleet. So think of your SOPs as your fleet instruction manual. We want clear steps on how things should be done every day, every week, and every month. And we want to start small. That can seem overwhelming to document how you do everything. So let's start small and don't aim to write a 100-page manual up front. Let's just focus on a few key things that we do every day. And some examples of this could be daily vehicle inspection reports. It can be a maintenance request. When something breaks down, how do we get it fixed? Well, let's document it. Let's standardize how we do it. Preventative and compliance, the inspections, how do we schedule them? And then finally, accident reporting. When an accident happens, what are the next steps? What is the process we follow post-accident? So to make these SOPs practical, I recommend leveraging existing resources. That's how we stood up, going from most of our processes being in someone's head to documenting and then coaching and moving forward with it. We leverage existing resources. Compliance measures being DVIRs, boom inspections, maintenance intervals on chippers. You don't have to come up with them. They're already established. They're things that we can leverage the manuals for. We have online resources. And so what I would recommend with any of these, if it's pertaining to a compliance item and a certain equipment type, is to go ahead and reference the resources that we already have. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody's already created for us. And so we can leverage that with our own knowledge, combine multiple ways of how people do things, and make it more towards how we do things going forward. So next step to that is documenting everything. I had mentioned earlier the process potentially living in somebody's head. When I first joined at Kendall, there was a good bit of that, to where if you asked, hey, how do you guys do something? It'd be like, oh, go ask Bob, right? There wasn't a formal documentation of here's how, when something breaks down, how do you get it fixed? Or the the DVIRs. When do we do them? How often do we do them? How long do we store them? Things like that. They were in people's head, and so we needed to get that onto paper. A real life example, another one, is when Xylem and Kendall merged. We had two very large fleets at that point that did things similar, but we did them different. So one of the first things we did when we merged was we wrote down how the Kendall side did everything, how did the Xylem do everything, and given all the experience that both sides had, we were able to come up with a way that we wanted to do it moving forward. But the very first step was actually writing down step one, asset breaks down. Step two, general foreman contacts fleet. Step three, fleet makes a decision, internal repair, outsource it. So we start developing decision trees, but it was very eye-opening once you actually start documenting the process. Because just documenting it, you potentially will find different holes or gaps in the process. But again, we're going to start building that foundation of how we're going to start conducting business and managing our fleet moving forward. Sorry, guys, I'm going to get random Teams message. Okay, so continuing on the SOPs, the real power of SOPs comes from defining responsibility. That's why I always say we want to assign by role and not by a name. An example would be, we don't want to say for DVIRs, that Nick does the inspections, and we don't want to document an SOP like that. Instead, we want to say that the driver role is responsible for performing and submitting the pre-trip inspection daily by 8 a.m. Why is this? Because people change, but roles, they do scale. So a driver might leave, a new one joins, but we built our SOPs around the roles, and it shouldn't break. The responsibility of who conducts that DVIR, the driver is going to stay the same according to that SOP. It's also going to help build accountability. When everyone knows what they're supposed to do and it's written down, it's much easier to hold the team to those expectations. And finally, SOPs are scalable. What's going to work for 5 trucks a day could work for 50 or 5,000 trucks in the future. Now, SOPs may need to be more fluid. You may need to change exactly how you do things, but you've got to build that foundation to then have future iterations to refine it and make it better. You can also, what we've done is you make SOPs part of your onboarding and training. You make them visible, you make them known as an organization, and you revisit them regularly to make sure that your SOP doesn't have gaps or it doesn't have bottlenecks that you can't fix. So other than just fix, we want to update the process. Okay, so organizing your fleet for scale. So a lot of small businesses, and we were guilty of it as well. We keep the fleet records scattered. Yeah. Some of them are in a binder, they're still in the truck. Some of them are in the office. And most infamously is they're in somebody's head. Somebody said they know that truck 123 has had historical transmission problems, but we don't actually have the paperwork to show that, but it's in somebody's head. So the problem is when the information it's fragmented, things start falling through the cracks. We're going to start missing oil changes. We're going to start missing more critical things like DOTs, boom inspections. So we got to make sure that we have things documented. So the first big step in this is centralizing the fleet management. And you don't need a really fancy fleet software to do this. Even when I started, things that we did, they were in online shared folders. So what we did was, again, very low cost, evolved since then, but you create a master folder, fleet folder, subfolders under that. They're going to be each of your unique IDs, asset numbers that we established there in step one. And you can keep your maintenance records and purchase, registration, copies of all that actually in those various folders. So if the DOT comes knocking and they need the past 90 days DVIRs on truck 1, 2, 3, everybody knows where that lives and they can reference it quickly. So with this as well, once we start centralizing where things live, that's when we start setting automated reminders. We can start regulating the fleet. If we've got a master list of when all the latest boom inspections were done, we're able to then say, all right, well, when's the next boom inspection going to need to happen? And that's where we start setting up automated reminders. Again, if it's on the low cost side, not a fleet management software. There's different things with Outlook, different things with reminders. There's a lot of free tools out there that if you've got the information of when these various inspections are coming due, we can leverage it to get that reminder and make sure that we're compliant moving forward. Okay, so we've established our equipment list. We've got SOPs. We're storing all of our fleet documentation in one place. So the next thing we want to do is start assigning those fleet responsibilities. And that's still the theme of establishing your SOPs. So this is one of the biggest make or break points for small businesses is managing the fleet ownership. So even with a small number of trucks or assets, someone needs to be responsible for making sure that inspections are being done, maintenance is scheduled, it's completed, compliance items are tracked, records are updated and accurate. And this doesn't mean you have to hire a full-time fleet manager right away. It could be a crew lead, an operations supervisor, or even an office manager, somebody that is responsible for the record keeping. But it needs to be somebody with clear expectations. Whoever has these various responsibilities, it needs to be clearly defined that they do own it. So again, if I go back to the different fleets that I've personally inspected and spoke with the leadership, I've seen it many different ways. But a lot of the times with fleets that are less than, say, 100 assets, most of the time there's not a lead fleet person. The responsibility is shared amongst different people within the operations organization. But if that does happen, we do need to clearly define who is responsible for what. So next, once we define who's responsible, we need to give them the tools to be able to continue to manage whatever they're responsible for. And so we've got to give them access to those asset lists, to that share folder with all the different assets, the inspection templates, and the clear expectation of here's the SOPs, here's where files live, here's how we track it. Whoever owns it, we need to be abundantly clear of what they're actually owning and what the responsibility is going to be moving forward. So KPIs, the engineering background, I love the KPIs. So scaling your fleet, you establish the asset numbers. We know the different types associated with them. So really what we're doing is we're starting to begin our data collection. And next step is what do you do with all this? You know your truck numbers. You start documenting the cost, the inspections. But what does that tell us? That's where KPIs are going to come into place. Key performance indicators. And again, we've said it from the beginning, you don't need a high-end software to do this, but what we do need is consistency. So I'd recommend that we choose a few key metrics to track. We want to start logging them monthly, weekly, maybe even daily, depending on how important they are to your organization. And we want to start using the trends from KPIs to actually start guiding our decisions. A lot of what we do at the beginning, it's kind of a gut feeling. You know the industry, you've done it a long time, you know these trucks. And so decisions are just based upon your lived experience. And so what the KPIs can do, provide a different way of thinking, or they can prove exactly what you have felt in your gut the whole time. So a few simple KPIs that you could start off with is first would be utilization. Just if I've got 100 assets, how many of them actually work each week, right? And more importantly, how many assets do not work each week? What I'd recommend is very high level. If you have assets that do not work, and start tracking why. Are they broke down? Are they spare? Am I trying to hire that CDL driver? But what's important about this is not only the weekly snapshot of your utilization, how many trucks are not working, you're going to start seeing trends as well. So something we do is each week we'll look at the quantity of trucks that did not work because they were broke down. As we go throughout time, does that number go higher? Does it go lower? If we look a layer deeper than that, we start looking at geographical regions that maybe these giraffes are more productive in one area compared to a different. And so what that allows us to do is ask the right questions. Is it the age of the giraffes? Is it the actual operation of the giraffes? Are we following those well-defined SOPs we spoke at the beginning of maintaining that equipment? Trending the KPIs allows you to ask the right questions and allows you to move proactively. Another example is if you don't know your margins till 2 months after the month end, that's already happened. You can't change that. Whereas if you have more live data, you've got your projections, you can see real time if you're hitting that cost per mile, if you're getting those miles per week, and you can take proactive actions in correcting maybe a negative margin job, right? So same thing with the fleet. We want to see those trucks that are costing more than the average, dig into why. Is it the preventative maintenance of the truck? Is it the operation of the truck? Maybe it's the age. Whatever that is, it's going to allow us to ask the right questions. So next high level KPI, so we mentioned utilization, how many trucks are working, how many are not. You can simply track that. Next one is going to be our scheduled maintenance. We want to start tracking when was the last oil change? When was the last DOT? When was the last boom inspection? Because that's critical. It's critical to the health of the asset. And even more importantly, it's critical to the safety of operations. When I've inspected fleets in the past, the thing that you don't want to hear is, when was the last time the boom inspection was performed on that truck? And nobody knows the answer to it. It's a compliance risk, and it's a risk to the employees as well. And so I really encourage that a beginning KPI is tell me how many trucks are current, and more importantly, tell me how many trucks are not current. Start tracking that every week, and that not current list of assets, that is going to be the initiative. That's what we want to tackle. Get that number down to 0 as soon as possible. And then we take a step back and we start looking at coming due inspections, and we proactively do those inspections before they cross that threshold of being non-compliant and potentially endangering employees. So the last KPI I'd recommend, we mentioned utilization, scheduled maintenance, and then we want to start looking at the actual assets. We want to start tracking downtime. So we do it. You can do it on say a daily basis, how many days out of service has this asset been? What we like to do too is, since on that initial asset list, you establish your asset type, you can start zooming out and you can say, hey, tell me on average, how many days out of service are my aerial lift trucks? Again, since it is a KPI that you trend each week, you want to see if that number goes up, it goes down, and we want to see why. And then if there are particular trucks that maybe have reached their useful life, maybe it's a business decision to spend maintenance CapEx and replace that truck. And again, that decision can be driven by the data and not just the gut feeling of that truck's always broke down. As a fleet manager, you could show that this truck last year worked a total of, call it 2 weeks. It costs us X amount of dollars. That's the information you need to go to whoever cuts the checks for trucks and make a business case for that. So with the KPIs, last thing on this one too, what I'd really encourage is gamification. You want to celebrate the wins and not just always highlight the negative that potentially could come with KPIs. A great example would this be is as we roll them out, if we have a new expectation that DVARs have to be done electronically, start putting it out there that, hey, if you do it, every week, every month, you get 100% score, hey, let's celebrate that employee. And we can do the same thing with the KPIs. If you got areas that are doing well, they're buying in, let's praise them and let's stand up and show how they rank against the rest of the fleet. And you'd be surprised with how many people are very competitive and you get better buy-in for it. All right, so let's get to our first 30 days. So these are all things that we spoke on during the presentation, but here are the next 4 weeks to get our fleet management really going. So week 1, inventory. Like we said, we want to start by walking the yard, reviewing what we own, document every vehicle, trailer, and major piece of equipment. Create a spreadsheet or another simple tool that has all of these attributes: year, make, model, VIN number. And then again, I encourage putting a type and a subtype that you can reference in the future. We then want to put the unique ID on those assets. And if we're doing that, it'd be a great time to also take a picture of the asset. You'll have your truck, it'll have its new asset number. You take a picture of it. When we go back to our central location for all of our fleet files, that'd be a great opportunity to store that picture there. So week 1, just simple, let's document what we got. Week 2, let's start building the structure. So now that we know what we have, let's define how we're actually going to manage it. So we want to start creating high-level SOPs for what we do. Again, you don't have to go into the weeds of absolutely everything, but let's identify those daily, weekly, monthly things that we do that are mission critical to the business. And step 1, write down how you currently do it. And it does not have to be perfect. But it's eye-opening if you just write down, when something breaks down, how do we handle it? If you write it down, you're going to start noticing potential bottlenecks, potential gaps in the process, and potential just not being clear on how we're going to do it. And so I'd recommend writing how you do it. And then next would be, how do we want to start doing it in the future? Now, when we write these SOPs on how we're going to do it in the future, we want to assign responsibilities to roles, not just people's name. And so if a fleet coordinator is responsible for something, we'd say fleet coordinator receives maintenance requests, fleet coordinator schedules with third party to fix the asset, fleet coordinator follows up with third party every 2 days, whatever it is. But you really want to put fleet coordinator instead of Nick Oney follows up with vendor. Nick Oney schedules the maintenance. Having the fleet coordinator defined within that SOP is going to allow you to go from 550 to 5,000 assets accordingly. Because as people say that fleet coordinator moves to a different role, moves on to a different company, whatever the case is, we bring in somebody else. We have our defined SOP, and we say fleet coordinator is responsible for whatever it is, and we go from there. Again, in week 2, let's go ahead and set up the shared folders for the fleet files. And again, this is if you don't have a fleet management software. There's a lot out there that are not very expensive, that can be worth purchasing. But if we want to do this on a budget, let's set up our shared folders that have our unique IDs, any paperwork we have with the trucks, those pictures we just took. Let's go ahead and put those into those shared folders. So week 3 is going to be tools. So we want to pick 1 or 2 tools that are going to make your life easier. Set up inspection checklists. We mentioned the DVIR, be it paper or digital. Again, there's a lot of apps that can now do this, different form builders that are for free. We want to implement a tracker for our various maintenance. I've really stressed this, especially for your DOTs, your boom inspections, the things that you absolutely have to do for employee safety. Let's go ahead and set up a when was the last time something was done, and when is the next time that it needs to be done. And if the answer on when was the last time it was done, if we don't know the answer to that, that means that that needs to be done right now. Let's go ahead and address it. So from there, I'd recommend we've got it on spreadsheet. The next time all these different intervals need to happen, let's move that into some type of reminder calendar invite, because we could probably manage a smaller fleet if we just, every couple of days check a spreadsheet. But as we start scaling, you've always got to think, if this process, if I were to add on 10 times the amount of vehicles, could I still check a spreadsheet every day? Probably not. So that's why we want to go ahead and set up reminders, SOPs here at the beginning. And so when that fleet does go from 50 to 500, we're able to manage it the same. So week 4, the fun part, this is launching and communicating these different processes. So what I'd recommend is, host potentially a 30-minute meeting. If it's in person, maybe it's a barbecue, something where you actually get people in there, what I would recommend for it. So what we want to do is we want to explain the why. Why are we doing all of this? So we want to dive into how it's going to save us time. It's going to make things a little bit easier, clearly defined processes, how we're going to move forward. It's going to improve your safety, and we're going to prevent future breakdowns from happening. I recommend let the end users actually test out any new tools. So we mentioned DVIR. If the new SOP is, hey, I found a great form builder online and I want to roll that out to our operations, actually get it into the hands of the operators, and they're going to tell you what's good, what's bad. But I think even more important than that, you start building that rapport and you start building that buy-in. That's what we did at the beginning. And when we got the input from operations, when we actually rolled it out, they were fully a part of it. They owned a piece of that. And so it became not just a top-down, here's how we're going to do things. It's more of a collaborative approach to, we want to move forward as an organization. Here's a tool that we're recommending. I want you to use it. Tell me the good, tell me the bad, and let's go from there. So next is going to be setting measurable goals. So we roll out these new SOPs. A goal could be 100% completion on these DVRs every day at 8 o'clock. Let's start tracking if we're actually doing that, and celebrate the wins. And if there's any way you can do a gamification on any of these KPIs, here's who had the least downtime in the month of May, or here's who had the highest driver score in the month of May, whatever that is. Celebrate them, not just go down, come down on the ones that are not adhering to the KPIs or not doing a good job. We also want to celebrate the wins where we can. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, we had a question from the audience. Would you mind touching on matching responsibility and authority? Authority from this person is by far the most important tool needed by an employee who has been assigned responsibility.
Yeah, so authority, I think step one to that is establishing those processes. So once you establish a process, you're going to have ownership. You assign that ownership to a role. And so I think that's what gives that role the authority to do whatever that action is or what it should be. An example is an asset breaks down, fleet coordinator is responsible for speaking to vendor. Well, that gives the fleet coordinator the authority and responsibility to speaking to vendors. My recommendation is when you write down those SOPs, you have the roles. I think it makes it more clear who has the authority to do what, because it should be a part of the SOP. That's a good question. All right, so a few key takeaways and next steps. So number one, start with systems in mind. So even if your fleet is small, approach it like a big company would. The example I gave you is I've got 5 assets and this is how I manage a breakdown. Could you still manage a breakdown if you had 50 assets and they're spread within a 12-hour radius around each other? Step 2 is assign the roles. So we don't want to leave fleet responsibilities floating. Someone should own the maintenance, should own the compliance. Someone should monitor the data. Even if it's one person doing multiple fleet responsibilities, we want to make it clear, very clear, who and what role is responsible for which process moving forward. So step 3, document the processes. So as we go through this exercise of the next 30 days, we don't just want to talk about how we're going to do things moving forward. You want to put it on paper, how we're going to do them in the future, document it. And I think when we go back to the authority of who has what authority to do what, now that we've documented these processes, I think that's going to make it more clear who can do what moving forward and how we're going to do it. Step 4, let's define a central source of truth. We're on a budget. It can be shared folders online. It could be a fleet management software. But biggest thing here is if I'm the DOT, I come knocking and I ask for maintenance records on that truck, that we know where those records live, and hopefully not a binder on the truck that potentially we have lost. Last, let's review our KPIs. Key performance indicators may not be the same from company to company. So we want to define what drives your specific fleet. A couple simple ones is how many units are out of service, how many units are past due their inspection, and then if we can dive into total cost of ownership, potentially make a maintenance CapEx decision in the future, it's a great place to start. Then to add on to that, if there's something specific to your fleet that we want to pay attention to, we want to start tracking it. If you can measure it, you can improve it. Okay, everyone. So that's thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions or dive deeper into any of these sections.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was a lot of really great information. And we do have a little bit of time for questions. If anybody would like to drop their questions for Nick into the Q&A, I'm happy to stay on a little longer and we can answer some of your questions. In the meantime, there is a link in the chat to the rest of the videos from the series that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So if you'd like to go back and review any of the previous topics, that's the link to do that. I will also upload the video of this presentation probably tomorrow afternoon at some point. So if you wanted to go back and review any of the information provided, then you can rewatch this recording or share with your coworkers, your fleet manager. Okay, so somebody asked for me to put the Q&A or the link for the video in the Q&A. I don't know if I can do that without an asked question. Let me see if I can do that. There you go. Any other questions? I will also, in just a moment, put the link for the CEUs in the chat. If you give me just a moment, I'll do that now. Please make sure you fill that out. It's important for the grant funding, so we have continued funding as well as reporting your CEUs. So I use that information to send to the ISA. As always, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks for the ISA to process those, so give it a little bit of time before you check your dashboard. That link is now in the chat if you would like to report your CEU or get CEU credit. I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, there is one in the chat. Can you describe a little more about how and who is responsible for decommissioning vehicles and/or equipment?
Good question. I think it depends on your organization. So I've seen it a couple of different ways. Usually with smaller fleets, it'll be the owner's decision when to decommission equipment. That's how it was when I had first started. However, as a fleet manager, when I first started, I did leverage the tools that I had to influence when we decommission equipment. A good example would be, we know, given our asset types, kind of the useful life of those assets. And if you've got the data, you can also roll in, say, a total cost of ownership. And if you can document the downtime of assets, you start building a case for when to decommission equipment. So in that situation, if it's the owner's decision, what I prefer to do is give the owner all the facts of here's why we should decommission this equipment or this group of equipment, and then they can make the business decision moving forward. How we are now, we've grown pretty large, and we've got a little bit more of a robust maintenance CapEx cycle. And so the decision of decommissioning comes directly from the fleet department, but you do have guiding principles of how much, say, net book value do you have on the asset, how much do you expect to receive in proceeds, and then if there's potentially a net book loss from that difference, that's when you could raise the flag to ownership, because there would be a financial impact to it. So I think there's a couple ways it could be done, but my biggest takeaway from it would be, if you have the data to support decommissioning, it makes it easier for whoever the decision maker is.
Great question. Thank you. Any last minute questions before we adjourn for the day? Again, I hope you'll join us for our next presentation. Will be June 26th on safety, building a safety program. It's sure to be a fun time. So hope you'll join us. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure to listen to you speak and have you share your expertise. We really appreciate your time and effort in putting this presentation together. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye.